Thank you. It's a real privilege to be invited here today and to share this stage with such amazing people. No pressure whatsoever. I am going to talk unashamedly about the practice of work in the Pacific and the role that TAFE Queensland in particular has to play. I don't have to say to this audience the importance of education as an export industry to the economy of Queensland and Australia. What you may not know though is that TAFE Queensland's commitment to on and offshore education is growing and strategically very important, not only for TAFE Queensland but for this whole state. There are at this time just under 3,500 students living and studying in this fantastic state through TAFE Queensland. This signifies a 14% growth over the last year and growing strong. The traditional markets in our neighbourhood, of particularly Asia, are still strong but being overshadowed in recent times through a lot of interest of international students wanting to come to Queensland from the Latin American region. Offshore delivery does feature in TAFE Queensland, mainly with activity in China. The popular courses, and there's a smorgasbord of training opportunities through TAFE Queensland, but the popular courses are around English language preparation with ALICOS, nursing, cookery, carpentry, a whole raft of trades, hospitality management and teacher training. What you probably don't know in this room is a little secret in aid and development that's delivered through TAFE Queensland. By far the biggest program that TAFE Queensland manages is the Australia Pacific Training Coalition, and I'd like to showcase that to you today. The Australia Pacific Training Coalition, APTC, was the brainchild of the Howard government in 2006 and launched in 2007. It was set up to be an institute imposed really on the Pacific, and there were many Pacific countries who did not like it at all. It was set up to deliver skills and Australian qualifications to Pacific Island citizens so that they could gain work at home and hopefully come to Australia and alleviate some of the skill shortages in the then mining boom. That didn't quite happen, but the gaining skills and qualifications to enter or stay in the paid economy in the Pacific certainly did happen. A massive aid investment through the Australian government managed through DFAT. 340 million plus to date over the last 11 years. There have been 13,000 adult graduates with now TAFE Queensland qualifications in a raft of different areas in the Pacific. 41% of those are women. Now, given that a lot of the training is traditional trades, this is a very, very strong outcome. Massively high student satisfaction and employer satisfaction. APTC partners with local training institutions and employers to improve workforce productivity across the board. And as I've said, TAFE Queensland has been the managing contractor for APTC since its inception one way or another. And we talk about, make China great, make America great. TAFE Queensland just makes great happen. So the region that we're talking about is in the South Pacific. It is in our neighbourhood. We have campuses in Fiji, Vanuatu, Samoa, Solomon Islands and PNG, and we work in partnership in some of the most vulnerable countries in the world, Nauru, Tuvalu, Kiribati, in desperate need to gain skills to address their local industries, but also as a way of getting out of that country to gain employment and residency elsewhere. We employ 200 staff through TAFE Queensland. 80% of those staff are Pacific Island citizens. When I started at APTC six years ago as the CEO, 20% of the employees at APTC were Pacific Island citizens. So part of what we've been doing is building up the local workforce through APTC. APTC responds to demand from employers for skills. We do focus on adult learners, not school leavers. in every part of the world, school leavers do a little bit of shopping before they decide what kind of career that they want. It's no different in the Pacific, really. But adult learners are very, very committed to gaining skills to really connect them to the paid workforce and improve productivity. So the areas in demand across the region are in traditional trades and technologies, as well as hospitality, big tourism industries across the Pacific, and a growing demand for community services and health. Funnily enough, things like aged care are starting to see a strong demand for those skills as communities are starting to be far more urbanised and breaking down. But the Pacific really is changing, and so must APTC. So rather than being an imposed institution on the Pacific, which has become known and loved, we are really focusing now on locally led reforming the TVET sector. So another 8 years of funding coming APTC's way, which is absolutely fantastic, launched by the then Foreign Minister in August, a couple of weeks before the event, and in the company of the Samoan Prime Minister. Now, this guy is amazing. He goes to every APTC event and he speaks up the importance of APTC in skilling not only his country, supporting TVET institutions in his own country, but for the whole Pacific. He also tells jokes in Samoan, which really annoys me because he laughs a lot and so does everybody else, and I never know what he's saying. So what is different? The name change from a technical college to a training coalition. If you think about it, it actually says it all. It is now about forming deep and enduring partnerships beyond a transactional, okay, let's talk about courses between training institutions. It is about driving TVET reform. Now, this will mean different kinds of coalitions in different countries. Not every Pacific Island country is the same. They have different vulnerabilities, different strengths. But what they are having more and more in common is a dialogue about how important skills are for their country, for their people, for their industries, and for labour mobility. They're talking about it, but not investing in it. So APTC now has a far more figural role in a far more agile way to bring these coalitions together to have that conversation. In this picture, it demonstrates a partnership in June with the University of the South Pacific, and a partnership between Pacific Island countries who have committed to a skills partnership at the recent Pacific Island Forum meeting in Nauru. Very different outcomes that we're focusing on, and I'll briefly mention each of these. TVET partners demonstrating a commitment to quality TVET provision. It's a very underfunded sector. However, we do need to be partnering beyond just being co-located in our campus countries with TVET institutions. We now have a TVET systems strengthening fund, which will help incentivise those champions locally who do want to drive reform. But the reform might not come in the form of, let's do another training course. The reform might come in, how do we have a conversation with government to fund skills development? How can we have a conversation with our tertiary regulator to give more attention to the vocational space? How can we work with our institutions to set up student quality management systems? It may not become a transactional training delivery relationship. In fact, APTC is on a mission to go from being the deliverer of courses to the enabler of local institutions. Co-investment in skills. We know that works really well in Australia. Big business loves putting its hand in its pocket to fund training, some of the time. It's very important for the long-term sustainability of skills in the Pacific that there is a valuing of technical and vocational education and training. Some of this valuing will come through the co-contribution to the cost of training and delivery services. Now, individuals, some of the poorest people in the world, how will they be able to make their contribution? They may make their contribution in time, leaving work, leaving their families to undertake training with APTC or with other institutions. We do need to move away from being a scholarships image, where come to APTC, you'll get a scholarship and have a great time and get an Australian qualification. It really is about valuing their own institutions as well. Many employers are investing in training. The example that you see on this photo is the garment industry in Fiji, which is a regulated industry, and they do pay award wages, you'll be pleased to know. Now, this company, this particular example here, they make all of the NRL and AFL football jerseys in Fiji. Now, this particular employer came to APTC several years ago and said, I want a better commitment to quality and a higher level of productivity from my mainly women employees. How can you help? Now, he was prepared to put his company's money on the table, some aid and development money and some expertise from APTC and then recently the Fiji National University to improve the productivity of his workforce. And now he's on the world stage, or at least the Pacific stage, really encouraging other employers in the private sector to invest. Improved employment outcomes. That's the name of the game for this investment in the Pacific. We know that poverty is relieved in a great part due to the fact that people can get skills for work to help them, their families and their workplaces and communities. We've got great traction with local employment. We have some traction with inter-regional employment, but the big winner and the big shift is now through the Pacific Labour Scheme, which Philip mentioned briefly, whereby Pacific Island citizens with Australian qualifications and increasingly local qualifications will be able to access the Australian labour market in a circular labour mobility program for up to 3 years. APTC is really keen to make this happen, but we're also very keen to make sure that there is a net skills gain for the Pacific. And what that means on the ground is that when APTC graduates go to Australia and work in an aged care centre and they come back 3 years later, they come back with a whole range of skills and knowledge to continue to undertake further education or go into the industry. And the industry in aged care in the Pacific may mean going into a village to provide community care there. APTC's role will be to track them through this experience and make sure that they continue the support of those individuals when they return. We are delivering 2 different tracks of training now, one for citizens that are wanting to migrate to Australia for a short or longer term experience, and those that are wanting to continue to work domestically. What remains the same? Plenty remains the same with APTC throughout these new big shifts. Our reputation for quality must be maintained. We now have great visibility across the Pacific, and it's because of the relevance of what we do, the results that we have, the partnerships that we have with TVET institutions and governments and industry. Our last survey showed us that those naysayers in 2007 definitely wanted APTC to stay for the next 8 years, so that was good. We also keep an eagle eye on social inclusion, opportunities for women, and certainly those living with disabilities and those who are very much geographically isolated in the region. We know that skills do promote economic prosperity for individuals and for their communities. We are aware of new and emerging industries. The climate change issues have caused us to really look at renewable energy training, for example, and entrepreneurship, making sure that many Pacific Island citizens can become job creators where there are no opportunities for employment in particular. And we will continue to deliver those 1,200 or more Australian International Standard qualifications through TAFE Queensland for the next 8 years, and increasingly growing that number because TVET institutions in the Pacific have been able to realise that standard for themselves with us. So thank you for this opportunity to showcase APTC. It's no longer a secret in this room. I think everyone here should be very proud that your taxes are producing this fantastic result. So thank you very much.